This episode of YXC Underground is proudly sponsored by Ace Burger. If you love cheeseburgers and milkshakes as much as I do, then you need to check out Ace Burger on the corner of Broadway and 9th Street, because they make a really great burger and shake. Thanks to owners Blair and Brad for their financial support and for believing in the podcast.
I think that change starts on a personal level. It doesn't, you don't see entire societies and entire communities change all at once. You see it in individuals. And in that aspect, I definitely see it. I see it happening, and it makes me feel good. It really does, because any change in the right direction should be celebrated, and should be looked at as a huge success.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to Forrest Eaglespeaker. He, along with Bayani Trinidad, are the featured guests in Episode 3, Season 2 of YXC Underground. When I hear the phrase truth and reconciliation, I think of big issues. I think of the systems in our nation's history that targeted Indigenous peoples in the hopes of assimilating their culture. I think of a commission that for 7 years heard story after story from Indigenous peoples describing the lasting impacts of the residential school system. And I think of something that one of my heroes, Gord Downey, said, that it will take 7 generations to undo the damage done to Indigenous peoples because of residential schools. These are really big things to wrap your head around, which is why I really admire what Bayani Trinidad and Forrest Eaglespeaker are doing. They are making a difference here in Saskatoon when it comes to truth and reconciliation on a personal level, in the hopes that it will have an impact on a larger scale. I love their enthusiasm and chemistry, and I know you're going to connect with their story coming up on YXC Underground. Thanks for joining me here on the podcast. I'm currently sitting in Place Riel at the U of S, and I thought there was going to be more people here so that it would give you a sense of how busy and active the university is, but of course I had to choose reading week to do my voicing here at the university, so it's a little bit quiet right now. Here, have a listen. It's a little quiet, but I'm here for a few reasons. The first is that a lot of the people that Bayani and Forrest are working with are university students. And the second is that this is where I met Bayani and Forrest for the interview a few months ago. And let me tell you, they give a good interview. Bayani and Forrest work for an organization called Canadian Roots Exchange. It's a registered nonprofit charity organization formed in 2008 as a way to bring Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth together to work towards reconciliation. As the organization's website states, quote, "Through exchanges, workshops, conferences, and leadership trainings, we bring together youth in cities, towns, and traditional territories across Canada in an effort to break down stereotypes, open a dialogue, and build honest relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people living on this land." In January of 2016, CRE opened an office here in Saskatoon. To be completely honest, I had never heard of Canadian Roots Exchange before I received an email from Bayani last spring describing the work he and Forrest were doing and wondering if it might be a good fit for this podcast. I am really glad he reached out. Bayani is the National Program Supervisor for the Western region of Canadian Roots Exchange. Forrest is the Community Engagement and Program Coordinator. Together, they help mentor young people, the majority of which are university age, on issues relating to truth and reconciliation. They also provide education on truth and reconciliation, and they organize events in our city that bring people from all walks of life together to help achieve the goals of truth and reconciliation. You'll hear Bayani describe one of these events and the positive impact that it had on people later on in the podcast. Education is a big theme in this episode. Bayani and Forrest talk about the importance of educating youth on truth and reconciliation, which is so important, and that's why I want to give a quick recap on what truth and reconciliation is and where we are at today in our country. In 2008, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. Its goal was to document the history and impact of the Indian residential school system on Indigenous students and their families. The Commission traveled across Canada, hearing more than 6,000 witnesses over a 6-year time period. I remember covering some of these events for CBC Radio, and the testimonies were raw and incredibly powerful. In 2015, the Commission released the 94 Calls to Action, a summary report of its findings to, quote, redress the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. It's the last part of that quote, advance the process of Canadian reconciliation, that Bayani and Forrest are doing through education. Why is education so important when it comes to truth and reconciliation? To answer that question, I spoke with Lorna Arcand. Lorna is a highly respected elder here in Saskatoon, and I had the privilege of meeting her at an Orange Shirt Day pancake breakfast held at Saskatoon's Central Urban Métis Federation's headquarters on Avenue M South. The room was packed, as you're hearing right now, so Lorna and I ducked into the kitchen to talk about the important role education plays, especially when it comes to young people.
It's important because for too long, young people and society have not been exposed to the realities of the residential school era, an era that almost destroyed a whole people, a whole culture. And I think it's important for the students, the young people, to understand what happened in the lives of the Indigenous people that makes us seem so different than everyone else in society. We do have a different way of doing things, and it's important to share that way so that society understands our languages, our culture, and the meaning of life to Indigenous people is very special, and we want to share that with society.
I remember when I was younger, I didn't learn a lot about Indigenous cultures and the Indigenous society in terms of Canadian history, but I feel that that's changing now, that there is more of that education. How does that make you feel?
It feels good, and it feels good to enjoy opportunities that we have today. Events like this are good, but there's a much bigger picture, and that's organizational policy changes that affect the lives of our people in all sectors: health, education, social services, sports, everything.
So then, Lorna, how do you hope to see those changes at such a big organizational level?
Well, the calls to action in 2015 identified 94 calls to action that institutions and organizations can follow to make the changes that's needed to make a more just society where everyone is on an equal level and that people are considered equally.
My thanks to Lorna Arcand for sharing her knowledge with me on that very busy September morning. A lot of the topics Lorna touched on are explored in my conversation with Bayani Trinidad and Forrest Eaglespeaker. Education, leadership, history are all brought up in the first part of our conversation. I started by asking Forrest why it's important to focus on youth when it comes to truth and reconciliation.
Because the youth are the in my opinion, they're the center of all of this, right? They're the center of all of this because, who else are we trying to create a better future for? We're trying to create a better future for the youth. And having them at the front lines of it, to me, just makes sense. I don't know. I feel like it doesn't really need to be overthought to me. But I also always do put an emphasis on the youth voice. I'm very passionate about sharing the youth experience, having things that are youth-led, and having the youth be at the center point of our society because, that's who we're leaving it behind for. That's who we're leaving all this behind for.
You're nodding in agreement.
Oh, I'm in agreement, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just going off with what Forrest said is like youth are our future, right? They're the next generation, and I think, our youth today are very just keen, like the term woke. Youth are very woke. I know for me, like I wasn't very woke when I was younger, but I think the generation that we have now are going to create long-lasting impacts. and they're the change makers of society today. So I think providing youth with the right tools and resources and bringing them together, they'll create like a huge impact for society.
Yeah, and the more that you spend time with the youth, and the more that you experience working with youth, you start to realize that a lot of the youth out there don't need to be empowered. A lot of them are already empowered. Mm-hmm. A lot of them already have that fire. They already have that drive. They just don't have a platform. Mm-hmm.
So like how do you see that passion when it comes to truth and reconciliation? Because as someone, like I feel like I'm a bit out of touch when it comes to that kind of high school age or maybe coming into university. But like, how do you guys see that passion? I'm curious about that.
Well, I think what's important to look at in that truth and reconciliation is the truth aspect of it. And a lot of these youth, they have a lot of truth to tell, and they're not afraid to say it. A lot of youth between the ages of, well, honestly, really not between the ages of any. As soon as that they have a comprehension of the world that they live in, the things that they face, the challenges and the stereotypes that they're born into, it creates an anger, and it creates an uncomfortability. But what I noticed a lot with the youth now is that anger doesn't manifest as it used to. It manifests in different kind of ways. I think the internet is a great place for youth to get that anger out in different ways, right? I noticed that there's always a stigma about anger, about angry youth, and them being destructive and getting involved in gang violence and drugs, which of course that always exists. But also too, no one talks about the other side of it, where these youth are empowering themselves and creating art. That they're using their platform, whether it's athletics, whether it's academics, or it's anything artistic, they're using those platforms within their communities to actually speak out against the problems that they're facing, on a daily basis. It really is, it's inspiring. It's really inspiring.
When you say youth, and I want to focus here specifically in Saskatoon, is it mostly Indigenous youth, or is it all spectrums of youth?
It's all spectrums of youth. Absolutely, it's all spectrums of youth, which is kind of which is kind of what we do. We focus on the relationship between the Indigenous and the non-Indigenous youth, right? And in a lot of ways, over the years, Indigenous folks, we've been tokenized to where we're the ones that need to educate. We need to share the information. We need to teach non-Indigenous people how to act right. But nowadays, it's very different in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of younger non-Indigenous youth who are starting to understand this on their own, and the Indigenous youth don't need to educate, right? They don't need to educate, and it's kind of this nice place where. I feel like I'm sort of creating this sort of utopian idea, which is not what it really is, but it's progress. Meeting these non-Indigenous youth that come from, small towns in like rural Saskatchewan, that have this understanding that they're born into a privilege, or that they aren't going to experience the same barriers as an Indigenous youth just because of the color of their skin or because of their last name. That to me is very positive. It's very positive, and I see that a lot in this work that I'm doing. Yeah.
Just to build off that, and thank you for explaining that, because I just wanted to clarify how that worked. So then, Bayani, how do you then see it in your work? Like, I guess you gave the example, Forrest, of a white person coming from rural Saskatchewan, and they have that education, and maybe they want to do something about it. So then, if they come to your office or they reach out to you a little bit, like how does then the relationship form? How does it evolve?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's just we always emphasize just the openness to be willing to learn and express that humility. I think just as a general human being, as long as you have those characteristics of being open-minded, being humble and learning to other perspectives and other views of people. I think that's what we really emphasize. And once that's established, then that creates the whole building that rapport and that relationship.
So then, do they physically come to your office then, or do you recruit, or how do you get people?
Yeah. I would say, I think from the years, it's honestly been like word of mouth, social media, youth referring other youth, other organizations referring youth to our programs. So a lot of it is just, I would say word of mouth, like people discovering like what CRE is and what we do. So, yeah.
Both of you talked about, the youth in your organization that come to you, and then you teach them these skills, and then they go out and do events on their own. Can you give me some examples of where you've seen that here in Saskatoon, where maybe you've worked with someone and then they've gone and done an event when it comes to reconciliation?
Absolutely. So some of the youth that we have worked with are either working for other youth organizations already or volunteering our students. So we get a handful of youth, like Forrest was saying, that bring their own strengths and gifts to the table. So some of the events that have happened is we partnered up with Saskatchewan Intercultural Association, and we had a reconciliation forum. And one of our youth works with SIA, Saskatchewan Intercultural Association, and that was to bring together the community of Saskatoon to just have that conversation, have a youth panel, have food, have some entertainment, hoop dancers, drummers, and just to see and experience the indigenous culture. So that's one of the events we had. Some other events we had were film screenings, documentaries about indigenous culture in Canada and in the States. And we also had like another event which was really cool that I really admired. The youth decided to do dance reconciliation, which brought together kind of different groups. So we had a traditional jingle dress dancer along with a drummer. We had the U of S Ballroom Dance Club, and then we had a break dancer come in as well, a breaker. And so not only was it a chance to learn about each other's movement and dance, but also to talk about the origins and the culture of the dance. So really, it's whatever the youth decide to plan and organize, and we always emphasize on their strengths and their gifts when planning these events or workshops.
That must have been so cool to see ballroom dancing next to jingle dress dancing, next to break dancing. That must have been so cool for you to see.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of the feedback was it was more of a interacting physical movement kind of event that we had, and it was just cool to bring all those humans together to experience not only each other's like culture, each other's dance, but it's just like a fun, activity to do. So yeah, a lot of it is just, our main thing is just bringing people together and learning from one another.
You are listening to episode 3 of season 2 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. This episode features Bayani Trinidad and Forrest Eaglespeaker. You can subscribe for free to YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app. Stream episodes of YXE Underground on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, or the website yxeunderground.com, and don't forget to leave a review. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search YXE Underground, and that's where you will find some great photos of Forrest and Bayani on a very chilly November afternoon. This episode is proudly sponsored by the great team at Ace Burger here in Saskatoon, and I'm very thankful for their financial support. Their generosity is helping to grow the audience of this local independent podcast, so thank you so much, Ace Burger. In the first part of my conversation with Bayani and Forrest, we talked about the importance of education when it comes to truth and reconciliation and the work they are doing through the Canadian Roots organization. In this next part, Bayani and Forrest explain why they're doing this work, and I found out that this is not the first time they have worked together in the same place. I really love this part of the interview because you hear the amazing chemistry that they share. They're just two really fun guys. We begin with Forrest describing how the work he and Bayani are doing is making a difference here in Saskatoon and how it makes him feel.
I personally do see the difference happening. I think that change starts on a personal level. It doesn't, you don't see entire societies and entire communities change all at once. You see it in individuals. And in that aspect, I definitely see it happening. And it makes me feel good. It really does, because, any change in the right direction should be celebrated and should be looked at as a huge success. Turning minor successes into major successes. That's just how I look at it. Because I know personally for me, it has really, being a part of this organization and starting to do this work a little more has really just benefited me as an individual. I have just grown as an individual being a part of this work, being a part of this organization, doing this stuff. You get to learn so much, get better understandings of people. Because, as an Indigenous person, I also have biases, right? I also have traumas, and I also have scars and wounds from non-Indigenous people, just growing up an Indigenous male. And so I have those wounds and I have those scars as well, and I share that with a lot of other people. We have that in common. And so it makes it easier for me to deal with those things and to actually put things in a different perspective, that maybe not everyone who has harmed me in the past with their ideas about me or with their words about me, maybe it wasn't from a place of anger or hatred, maybe it was just from a place of ignorance. And that for me is a lot easier to deal with. I can deal with somebody being ignorant more than I can deal with someone being hateful. Yeah.
I think just going off with what Forrest said, it really starts at the individual level. I hear a lot of times, like, reconciliation starts with a person, or healing or standing in solidarity. It starts with the individual. And once that person has the ability or the openness to, willing to learn, willing to acknowledge like privilege, willing to just like be open-minded and learn, because that's the only way we're gonna grow and heal as humans, as people, as a community, is to learn from one another. Mm-hmm. And if there's that ignorance factor, then that creates like that huge barrier, right? So it's all about, be willing to learn and knowing that truth aspect, right?
Yeah, that truth aspect is huge, because even within ourselves, like, I know myself, for a long time, I never was able to talk about privilege. I always looked at myself as extremely underprivileged, not recognizing the fact that that was also ignorance based on my life, because I may be an Indigenous male, but I'm also a cisgendered male. That comes with its own privilege. So it's about recognizing that as well. You know what I mean? And I think once you can recognize those things within yourself, to be able to say, you know what, I have that privilege. I have that privilege. And so it makes it easy for me to create space for people that don't have that privilege.
And I feel like so much of this is based around education. And I just feel like there's this momentum. Like, because I remember being in high school, and I never learned a lot about this. And even at university as well. And I have a history degree from the University of Calgary. And this wasn't incorporated a lot in terms of Indigenous history in Canada. And yet I feel like there is that wave of like you said, you've got kids from, whether they're from Saskatoon or rural Saskatchewan, they come here to the U of S and they're armed with more of this knowledge. Does that excite you guys? Does that give you, I don't know if hope's the right word or too strong a word, but does that encourage you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just going off of what you said, even when I went to elementary and high school, I wasn't, as woke. I didn't have this knowledge and teachings and just grasp understanding of what the youth have now. Like the youth that are, growing and continuing, like have a broad sense of knowledge. And for me, it just, it fires me up. It inspires me because it makes me want to be like a better person, a better human.
Yep, I agree with that. 100%, nailed it, yeah.
Oh, that was nice. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, on the personal side, what made both of you join this organization and want to do this type of work? Because you're obviously smart, passionate people, and you could be doing anything here in Saskatoon or anywhere. What made you want to do this?
I think for me personally, I was referred to this organization actually. So I've been doing youth work already, so it's something I've always been passionate about, and I love working for nonprofit organizations. So for me, what really led me to this organization is just the work that they're doing, and that's bringing youth from all over together to have those relationships. And ever since I started working with this organization already, like Forrest was saying, it's really helped me grow as an individual and learning more about my community. But as well, it's helped me really want to learn more about like my own culture as well and my own roots. So I think the fact that like this organization allows you to grow as a professional, but both as an individual and I would say as an artist as well, has really drawn me. Our organization's still kind of like at that infant stage, like we're still growing, we're still expanding our programs and our staff. So I think the ability to grow and to learn is what really drew me in.
You mentioned the artist side too. Can you just expand a little bit, because you are an artist?
Absolutely. So for myself, I've been dancing for about 17 years. It started out with my cultural dance with the Filipino pavilion at Folk Fest. And then after that, I discovered of breakdancing, breaking. And so I think the nice thing too about this work and what I do as an artist and with what other youth are doing is everyone has their own creative outlet, like Forrest was saying earlier, whether that's athletics, music, dance. And I think with this organization and the work that I do as an artist, there's those crossovers and intersectionalities of like with reconciliation and the work that we do, it's finding that outlet with youth and relating on that same level, whether people love music, whether people love dance. That's the whole thing about building that relationship and that rapport, is finding similar interests that the youth and other folks have. And then from there, you're able to connect and do this type of work in different systems. So, yeah.
Forrest, what drew you to this line of work?
Well, same as Bayani, I was referred here actually by Bayani. I've kind of been a frontlines worker for the past 10 years. I'm working with a lot of different youth organizations, nonprofit organizations, a couple government organizations. But my work has always been centered around working with vulnerable population and at-risk youth. I've always been like either working one-on-one with adults with disabilities, making transitions from transitioning from the reserve to living in support homes, or people transitioning from group homes into support homes or into adult group homes or whatever. So I've always been involved in that way. I've also done lots of community work as well. I used to work for an organization called Crew back in the day here in Saskatoon, and we were like an after-school program. And I've worked in group homes as well. And so I've always been very, very passionate about working with youth. I do lots of work within schools. I go and I do teaching. I teach songwriting to youth. I do talks in schools. I've always been passionate about youth. And it kind of all stems from a place where, I want the youth to have more opportunity than I was provided with as a kid, because I didn't have a lot of opportunity where I grew up, and where I went to school and sort of my home life. I didn't have a lot of opportunity, and it led me down a rough path for a lot of years, and so I've always been very passionate about being able to create opportunities for youth. I've understood from a really young age that opportunity starts with someone willing to just provide it, put in the work, and give it to somebody else. So I've always thought about it in that sort of way, and so I'm very big on the understanding that everything happens for a reason, And so when I found out about Canadian Youth Exchange from Bayani, I was kind of in a place where, I'm a new dad, so I have a 2-year-old. So I was at home with her a lot of the time, but I was trying to get back into work. I had just come off working at a group home and was doing some small contract work here, doing songwriting to youth in different communities around Saskatchewan. But I was looking for something more solid, more foundational, something that I was passionate about. And so I just, I just applied for the job here. I just applied for it because I really believed in what they were doing. But the thing was about it, I was really intimidated because I don't have a lot of education, right? I don't have a lot of Western education past high school. But that doesn't really apply to this organization because we're Indigenous-led and we're youth-led. We don't rate someone's skill or someone's capabilities on whether or not they've gone to some post-secondary institution, right? And so once that happened and I realized that that was a thing and I got hired because I was really intimidated by it, then it just it really put it into perspective of what the organization is, what my potential is within the organization. And so I've been here really, it's been a big learning curve, a lot of the stuff here, because like I said, I've been more of a frontlines worker for a lot of years, but I recognize that I have more of a capacity now to create opportunities on a larger scale.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel as though you two have very good chemistry together. And the reason why I say that, as you both smile at one another, is that while you two have been giving answers, like Forrest, if you're giving an answer, Bayani, you're nodding in agreement. You're shaking your fist like, yeah, that's right. Like it's like, so is it fun for you guys to work together on this type of stuff?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I think just going back through time, we've worked various jobs together. When Forrest mentioned crew, he discovered of us when we started providing some dance workshops for the youth. We've done even labor work together at Saskatoon Machine Works. So we've always had that chemistry together. And one day I just ran into him again, actually up above us at the Place Riel. And, I said, check out our organization, we're hiring. And so I think we just have a good balance of, we do have that good chemistry, but we also share different perspectives and give each other different views. And I think the fact that we're both passionate working with youth and we've done frontlines work, we have a lot of both similarities and commonalities, but also like differences that we can learn from one another.
Yeah. And our signs are very compatible.
Yes. Because I'm a Capricorn and you're...
I'm a Sagittarius.
Oh, yeah. We've been doing the whole horoscope thing too lately, so yeah.
I'm really new to the horoscope thing. And I don't really fully understand all of it. But what I do know is that every time that I do any of the horoscope tests, always the one on there that is about signs that'll help you grow, Bayani's always on there. He's always on there.
Vice versa.
Every single one, yeah. Yeah.
And I have to say too, you two are in a very cozy office together. So it's a good thing that you guys are good friends, because
Yeah, absolutely. Could go sideways quick. Yeah. But
I just have one more question for you guys, because it's been great chatting with you, and I love your energy. When it comes to Truth and Reconciliation in Saskatoon, is there, because you guys are doing so much work on the ground, is there one thing that you would love to see that would really help maybe speed things up or accelerate or bring Truth and Reconciliation efforts even more into the forefront? Is there something that maybe top of mind comes to you?
That's a really good question. There's so many different things that could help elevate that process. A lot what I hear from the youth is just honestly more youth programs, more resources. So providing more tools, resources for the youth. But I think it's slowly happening, but it's going to take time. But it's bringing our community together more and more through events, through workshops, through speakers. I think that's the main thing is once the community has like a mutual understanding and everyone is of agreement, then that's the growth period. So I think it's finding ways to bring people together that may or may not have crossed paths before. Yeah.
You know, I tend to think about these things in kind of I don't want to say intense, but in a very direct way, because I feel like this work needs to be very direct. And so what I honestly think will help speed this along is for non-Indigenous people, I think what may be important is to identify the fact that that the way that you have been raised may be wrong. Everything that you have been taught about Indigenous people and about the country that you live in may be wrong. You need to be okay with that. And for Indigenous people, I think it's important to keep using your voice. Use your voice, use your confidence, share your gifts, and understanding that on both sides, that takes reprogramming. That takes reprogramming on both sides. And to not be intimidated by that fact and to not feel angered by that fact, because everyone needs to heal, right? We all need to heal. And I think it's important to understand that from both sides, have that compassion for both sides, and create the space. Create that space.
Thank you for sharing your voices with me today. It was awesome speaking with you both. Like I said, your energy is like just so infectious, and the work you're obviously doing in our community here in Saskatoon is really important. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot. It was great.
Thank you.
Cool.
A big thank you to Bayani Trinidad and Forrest Eaglespeaker for sharing their time and appearing on the podcast. I really find their energy just so inspiring, and I hope you do as well. If you want to learn more about the work they are doing, visit canadianroots.ca, or better yet, go see Bayani and Forrest at the 220 Working Space. They're on the second floor, and they would love to meet you. This has been episode 3 of season 2 of YXC Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. I'm the host, editor, and producer of this podcast. If you like what you've just heard, and I really hope that you did, please subscribe for free to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app. Please leave a review if you have the time, and you can stream episodes on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, or the website yxcunderground.com. That's where you can find all of the amazing people who have shared their stories on YXC Underground. Follow the podcast on social media. Find YXC Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and that's where you can see photos of all of our guests taken by Janelle Wallace. Thank you, Janelle, for being such an amazing photographer and such a pleasure to work with. Thank you to my cousin Andrew Dixon for creating the original music for this podcast. And a big thank you to Blair Voth-Miller and her husband Brad for sponsoring this episode. They own Ace Burger here in Saskatoon and were gracious enough to say yes when I asked if they would be interested in sponsoring a few episodes of YXC Underground. Blair and Brad own 4 restaurants in the city: Ace Burger, 13 Pies, Congress Beer Hall, and Hometown Diner. It's a great partnership because A, I really love eating at all these local independent restaurants, and B, Blair and Brad are really involved in the community and understand the importance of giving back, which is what I'm trying to do with this podcast. So it's a really great partnership. We'll be doing some fun giveaways for all the restaurants on social media in the months to come, so be sure to follow YXC Underground and Ace Burger for a chance to win. Next month, a featured interview with Julia Holiday Scott, who is the support services coordinator for AIDS Saskatoon. And you're going to hear some tape of me taking an HIV test as part of an awareness campaign. It was quite the learning experience, so I hope you subscribe to the podcast and enjoy that episode. So that's next month. Before I go, I would like to acknowledge that all the interviews in this episode were recorded on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXE Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson, and I am so excited to sign off with a great local song. This is the first time that we've been able to sign off with a song. So, did you know that Forrest Eaglespeaker is an accomplished singer-songwriter? Well, he is, and he goes by the name The North Sound. Now, I saw Forrest and his band play at this year's Regina Folk Festival, and they were so awesome. They played some workshops, and they even got to open for Blue Rodeo before they hit the stage on the Sunday night. And I asked Forrest if I could play one of his songs on the podcast, and he graciously said yes. So, taking us out today, here is The North Sound with their latest single, Between the Ditches. We'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.
Don't look up now, it's coming down. Rains are falling everywhere. Everyone and everything around these days seem to not really care at all. So I'ma pack up and leave this place. I'm headed back home somewhere between the ditches. And I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I know someday it will. And I still remember that blue October, felt it in your eyes and on your skin. And I thought we would learn to live again between the ditches. From the northeast edge of a city cut down to quarters. They never really liked me much, so I headed east across the border. And they still don't like me here, but they don't need to hear my songs. And I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I know someday it will. And I still remember that blue October, felt it in your eyes and on your skin. And I thought we would learn to live again between the ditches. And I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I know someday it will. And I still remember that blue October, felt it in your eyes and on your skin. And I don't know when it's gonna happen, but I know someday it will. And I still remember that blue October, felt it in your eyes and on your skin. And I thought we would learn to live again between the ditches.